Right now, while you're watching this, 10 countries are one Canadian policy change away from economic collapse. I'm not talking about small nations you've never heard of. I'm talking about superpowers. Wealthy countries. Nations with militaries, skyscrapers, and nuclear weapons. And yet, every single one of them would crumble without Canada. Canada controls 20% of the world's fresh water, 17% of global uranium, and they feed over 150 countries. But here's what most people don't know. Canada's generosity has an expiration date. So if you've ever wondered why certain countries seem untouchable, this is the real power behind the curtain. Let's count down the 10 countries that literally can't survive without Canada, and trust me, number 1 will shock you. Jamaica's economy would crumble in 72 hours without Canada. And no, it's not about tourism. Let me introduce you to Claudette. She's 34. A single mother in Kingston. Works at a call center. She makes just enough to scrape by, but 60% of her income doesn't come from her paycheck. It comes from her brother in Toronto. He sends her money every 2 weeks. Rent. Food. Her daughter's asthma medication. In 2019, he lost his permanent residency status. The money stopped. For 3 months, Claudette couldn't afford her daughter's inhaler. Imagine your child gasping for air in the middle of the night, and your phone stays silent. Here's the thing, Claudette isn't unique. Jamaica receives $2.4 billion annually in remittances, and according to a 2022 World Bank report, 82% of that comes from Canada. That's 16% of Jamaica's entire GDP. But it gets worse. Canada also supplies 40% of Jamaica's wheat and corn. If Canada froze exports for just 2 weeks? Food riots. Empty shelves. Chaos. Jamaica is dangling by a thread, and Canada is holding the scissors. But Jamaica's dependence is nothing compared to what's happening in the Caribbean's hidden crisis. Barbados has a secret. It's basically a Canadian economic colony, and most Barbadians don't even realize it. 37% of Barbados tourists are Canadian. That's according to the 2023 Barbados Tourism Board. And since tourism makes up 40% of the country's GDP, you do the math. Meet Trevor. He's 52. Owns a beachside restaurant in Bridgetown. For 20 years, his business thrived on Canadian snowbirds escaping the winter. Then, in winter 2023, Canadian travel warnings spiked due to crime fears. His revenue dropped 61% in 8 weeks. He had to let go of 9 staff members. All family. His nephew cried when Trevor told him there was no job anymore. Trevor stood behind his empty bar, staring at the ocean, wondering how everything fell apart so fast. Barbados tried pivoting to European tourists. But here's the problem. Canadians spend 3 times more per visit than Europeans. Without Canada, Barbados doesn't just lose tourists. It loses its entire economy. And this dependency? It's spreading across an entire continent. Since 2022, Ukraine's survival hasn't just depended on weapons. It's depended on Canadian wheat, money, and a lifeline most media ignores. Canada has sent $13.3 billion in aid since February 2022. That's according to Global Affairs Canada, December 2024. Per capita, Canada is the 3rd highest donor in the world. Let me tell you about Anastasia. She's 29. A teacher. She fled Kharkiv with her 2 young sons when the bombs started falling. A Canadian sponsorship program got her family housed in Winnipeg in 90 days. Her sister is still in Ukraine, surviving on Canadian-funded food aid. Anastasia remembers the smell of fresh bread in the refugee center, the first meal that didn't taste like fear. But here's the thing, if Canada cuts aid due to budget crises, Ukraine loses access to $400 million per year in grain replacements and military training programs. That's not just numbers. That's survival. But Ukraine isn't the only war-torn region on this list. There's a country that would disappear entirely without Canada. Haiti has collapsed 4 times in 20 years. And every single time, Canada was the only reason it didn't become a failed state. Canada sent 2,400 troops during the 2004 coup. $100 million in 2010 earthquake relief. And right now, Canada funds 60% of Haiti's UN police force. That's straight from UN peacekeeping data, 2024. Meet Jean-Pierre. He's 41. Lost his wife and daughter in the 2010 earthquake. Canadian Red Cross rebuilt his neighborhood's water system. He now runs a small community center funded by a Montreal nonprofit. The first time clean water came out of the tap, he fell to his knees and cried for 20 minutes. But here's the dark reality: Haiti's current gang crisis? Canadian-trained police are the only thing preventing total anarchy. Without Canada, Haiti doesn't just struggle. It vanishes. But there's a country on this list that's rich, developed, and still completely dependent on Canada, and it'll shock you. The Philippines has 11 million citizens living abroad. And more of them are in Canada than anywhere except the United States. If Canada closed immigration tomorrow, the Philippine economy would lose $8 billion instantly. According to the 2023 Philippine Statistics Authority, remittances from Canada total $7.8 billion, supporting 3.2 million families back home. Let me tell you about Maria. She's 38. A nurse in Vancouver. She sends $1,200 every month to her parents in Manila. Her father needs dialysis, $600 a month. Her younger brother's in college, another $400. Without her income, they don't eat. She hasn't seen her mother in 6 years. But she knows if she stops working, her mother stops breathing. Here's the insane part: 22% of the Philippine GDP comes from remittances. Canada is the second largest source. The Philippines tried to reduce dependency with domestic job programs. Failure rate? 71%. That's from a 2023 Asian Development Bank study. They need Canada. Period. And if you think that's extreme, wait until you hear about the Middle Eastern country that would run out of food. Lebanon's economy has shrunk by 58% since 2019. Hyperinflation. Government collapse. Power outages for 22 hours a day. But Canadian aid and expat money are the only reason 2 million people didn't starve. Canada is Lebanon's fourth largest aid donor, $150 million per year, according to Global Affairs Canada. Lebanese Canadians send $1.2 billion in remittances annually. That's 2024 World Bank data. Meet Rami. He's 44. An engineer in Montreal. He wires $800 every month to his sister in Beirut. She's a pharmacist. But her salary? $40 a month. Worthless. His money buys medicine, baby formula, and generator fuel. Last month, she told him she hadn't eaten meat in 3 weeks. He stayed awake that entire night. Here's the kicker: Lebanon's government is broke. Without Canadian wheat imports, 250,000 tons per year, bread prices would quintuple overnight. Lebanon is on life support. And Canada is the machine keeping it alive. But there's a European ally whose entire defense system depends on Canada, and it's not who you think. Poland is NATO's eastern shield. The front line against Russian aggression. But without Canadian uranium, military aid, and intelligence, they'd be defenseless in 6 months. Canada supplies 18% of Poland's nuclear fuel for energy. That's according to Cameco Corporation, 2024. And that fuel generates 30% of Poland's electricity. Canadian CF-18s and surveillance planes have been stationed in Poland since 2022. Canadian trainers have prepared 12,000 Polish troops. Meet Kasia. She's 33. A teacher in Gdansk, near the Russian border. Her school runs on nuclear power. She knows if those reactors shut down, her city goes dark. And Russia notices. She kisses her daughter every morning and wonders if she'll still have a country when she grows up. Poland tried buying uranium from Kazakhstan. Negotiations failed, Russian interference. They have no backup plan. Only Canada. But there's a rich Western country that would collapse even faster without Canada, and it's one most people think is self-sufficient. The UK lost an empire. But they kept Canada. And right now, that's the only thing keeping their economy from a death spiral. Canada is the UK's third largest energy supplier. Oil sands crude makes up 15% of UK imports, according to the 2024 UK Department of Energy. The post-Brexit trade deal with Canada? $29 billion per year. Meet Nigel. He's 58. Runs a manufacturing plant in Manchester. His machines run on Canadian imported steel and aluminum. In 2023, a supply delay hit. His plant shut down for 11 days. He lost £400,000. He stood in the empty warehouse, listening to the silence where machines used to hum, and felt 40 years of work evaporate. But here's the hidden vulnerability. The UK's food security is 40% dependent on Canadian wheat, canola oil, and pork. And without Canadian energy? UK fuel prices would spike 35%, riots would follow within weeks. That's an Oxford economics study from 2023. The UK has alternatives. But they're expensive, unstable, and years away. But the UK has options. The next country? They have zero backup plan. Bangladesh has 170 million people. And most of them would go hungry without Canadian wheat, lentils, and aid. Canada is Bangladesh's largest lentil supplier, 1.2 million tons per year. That's Agriculture Canada, 2024. And that's 73% of their supply. Lentils are the primary protein source for 90 million Bangladeshis. Meet Fatima. She's 26. A garment worker in Dhaka. She earns $3 a day. She feeds her family doll, lentil curry, 6 nights a week. In 2022, Canadian lentil prices spiked 40% due to drought. Her kids ate once a day instead of twice. Her youngest son asked why his stomach hurt. She told him it was growing pains. It wasn't. Here's the nightmare scenario. Bangladesh is losing farmland to floods. Canadian imports aren't a preference. They're survival. If Canada stopped exports, 12 million Bangladeshis would face acute malnutrition within 90 days. That's a World Food Programme study from 2023. But there's one country whose collapse would trigger a global crisis, and Canada is the only thing holding it together. The United States is the world's superpower. The richest nation in history. The strongest military ever assembled. But without Canada, they'd be a third world country in 18 months. And most Americans have no idea. Let me hit you with the numbers. Canada supplies 60% of U.S. crude oil imports, 4.3 million barrels per day. That's U.S. Energy Information Administration, 24.85% of electricity in 8 U.S. states comes from Canadian hydropower. $2.7 billion crosses the border every single day in trade. That's U.S. Census Bureau data. 20% of U.S. freshwater supply comes from Canadian sources. Meet Tom. He's 51. A trucker in Detroit. Hauls auto parts across the Ambassador Bridge every day. 30% of his cargo is Canadian-made. In 2022, the bridge was blocked for 6 days during protests. His company lost $1.2 million. He was laid off for 3 months. He sat in his driveway, staring at his silent truck, wondering how he'd tell his wife they might lose the house. Here's the geopolitical reality. U.S. military bases in 14 states depend on Canadian electricity. One supply cut? National security crisis. And here's the nightmare scenario. If Canada turned off the oil tap, gas prices in the U.S. would hit $9 per gallon within 2 weeks. That's a Harvard Energy Policy study from 2023. California goes dark. The Midwest freezes. The economy collapses. Canada controls the world's third largest oil reserves. More fresh water than any country. And the resources 10 nations can't live without. Yet they're one of the most humble superpowers in history. So here's the real question. If Canada decided tomorrow to put itself first and cut off exports, which of these 10 countries collapses first? And would your country survive? Drop your country in the comments and tell us, would you last 30 days without Canada? Be honest. And if you think Canada should start charging triple for their resources, hit that like button. Let's see how many people agree. Next video? We're revealing the 5 countries that could actually replace Canada, or can they? You'll want to see this.